All right, good morning, Chief Davis. So anyway, I just have a few questions that I would like to ask you. Now, a few of these came from some people on our Facebook page as well. So the first question I had was, what convinced you to leave the Sheriff's Department after 24 years?
So, well, gosh, what convinced me? It wasn't convincing. I had reached a point in my career where I was close to retirement there. And, I really had an opportunity when I got the opportunity to come here, it was more about me doing the research on the Elk Grove Police Department. Now, obviously, early on in my career, when I was a PIO, I spent a lot of time down in Elk Grove as an officer and then also as a PIO working for the Sheriff's Office. So before we became our own department, I spent a lot of time down here, reporting to our community, reporting to the sheriff, reporting to our council here, and the mayor here on things that were going on just because I was the PIO. So I was kind of early on intrigued with the city itself. When they split off, I stayed with the Sheriff's Office. I didn't have enough time on, and for me, it just made more sense to stay there. So when the opportunity came up, Chief Albright and I had a conversation. Shortly after he promoted to chief, and in that conversation I had with him, he was just telling me about how great the organization is, the people that are here, the city, the support, the things that I think are often taken for granted in law enforcement. We just don't think about those things, and it was very appealing. And I was sitting at a point in my career with the Sheriff's Office where when this came open, I was eligible to leave. So for me, I took quite a bit of time doing some research on the city itself, our budget, our history with budget, our history with the police department, what we looked like as individuals and as an organization in policing for our city. The community response to this department was really important to me because, I think if you're anybody in the profession, you want to go somewhere where people want you in that profession. And our city, they really want us here. So that was part of it. What I did was I worked at the courthouse at the time that I applied, and I would go out into the hallways and I would look for Elk Grove police officers, and they had no idea that I was putting in for this job. And what I did was I wanted to see their interactions with other law enforcement, the prosecutors or public defenders or attorneys, their interactions with the public, and just their interactions with each other. And for me, it was significant to see that their interactions with each other didn't differentiate between themselves and anybody else that was at the courthouse. And I think that speaks to who we are and our character with this in our organization, and the expectation for a professional environment and a professional demeanor and who we are and what we are speaks volumes. Because I know that if they are professional and if our membership is treating everybody appropriately when nobody's watching, then I know they're doing it all the time because there's no, they're not pretending. And so for me, our membership is probably the most professional membership of law enforcement that anybody would want as a leader. So having an opportunity to come and be a part of that is really where what I was looking for at that point in my career. The other thing that was, one of the very, very fortunate things, and I've talked about this a lot, is that at this point as an executive in a profession, it's very, very rare that you have an opportunity to work in a place that you grew up. Living in Sacramento County my entire life, having a chance to stay here and work as an executive in this profession doesn't come across very often. Typically, if you leave an office like the Sheriff's Office and you're trying to become a higher level executive in this profession, you have to leave your region. Typically, you have to uproot your entire family and move. And the fact that came up here and that I even had an opportunity, was worth it for me. And then, I think when I look at the testing process and I look at what the expectations were of Chief Albright and what our city expects, it was everything that I wanted to be and be a part of. I had an opportunity to work in Rancho Cordova, in my first municipality, and that experience itself is what really prepared me for even having a chance to put in. It showed me that municipality policing is different than county or sheriff policing.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's significant. I mean, and it's hard for people who haven't seen the differences. But working in those environments, we are different in how we're policed. We have opportunity. We have time to spend with our community, follow through with cases. And if you're a patrolman on a call, you can wrap yourself around that call and the victim and or suspects and finish it and complete it. And that's significant. I think it bonds us in our relationship with our community. And it gives us greater opportunities to build relationships, not just go call to call to call. And so for me, all of those things, coupled with, to be quite honest, Chief Albright, excellent leader. Mm-hmm. And I clearly in the last 2 years, if we look what he's done for this department, 17 years in total, probably one of the greatest mentors, developers, and leaders of men that we could ever have.
Okay, my second question. So you joined the Elk Grove Police Department right before COVID hit. What were some of the challenges that presented?
So, like we were talking when you first walked in, my first day, so I was sworn in District 56, and we left there and had to come back to the police department for a meeting of this thing called COVID, and we didn't really know what it was. 3 days later, our school district, I believe it was 3 days later, our school district says we're canceling schools, things like that within that week. And so for us as a city and an organization, we had to look at everything. It changed everything that we did. It changed our communication. It changed our interactions. It changed our responses to calls. We pulled back everything. I mean, we literally changed the majority of the things that we did that was our normal. And so for me, it was coming into an environment that not only is different from where I came from, but completely different in society, policing. Everything changed. And I would say our greatest challenge at that moment was communication. And it was communicating not just with our community, but with our own people. And because we had to pull our volunteers back. We couldn't have them, and they're our ambassadors, right? And our patrolmen and all of our membership completely changed. We had people staying home. We had people coming to work. We had shifts that didn't even communicate with each other because we didn't want them to cross paths and get each other sick. We had to change protocols when how we responded to homes. Could we even go into homes without masks, with masks? What if there's an emergency? What are we supposed to do? Do we call fire? All of these things that were compounding this problem because we just didn't know how to respond to it or address it because we didn't know the protocol. Nobody did. So it was really an effort for us to take advantage of our real-time information center. What it did was COVID had made us figure out ways to communicate with our internal community, which is obviously all of our membership. It's all of our non-sworn or our professional staff, our city side as well, because our city side doing the same thing, having the same problems. We couldn't even communicate with them because all of us were separate. Well, and as you know, when you have the entire government that you're working with and they're not able to communicate face to face, and everything's done by phone or by email, or, we miss and we lose things. Yeah. So our real-time information center really allowed us to open up that chain of communication. And you've probably heard about it before. Chief has probably talked about it with you.
Yeah.
But that real-time information center, honest to goodness, changed how we police. Today, it is a integral piece of who we are and what we are every single day. Calls for service, communication internally, communication externally, and it's a venue for us to push information to our community that kind of guides how we are in an emergency and how we are in non-emergency times. A wonderful piece of technology. And I think what it did was it taught us to leverage the technology to make our profession easier, to make us be able to respond more efficiently with greater accuracy. So, if there was a change or if there was something that came out of COVID that was a positive, it was that we looked at the technology and what we do for our profession and we learned to make it fit, not just in an emergency, but in our everyday policing now as we've come out of some of the COVID protocols. And so COVID absolutely changed what we do, how we do it. But in the end, I think it's made us stronger and more communicative and more relational because we have to be. And it gave us a venue to do that.
Very interesting. Okay, Chief Davis, what do you believe is the most difficult challenge you will face in your first year?
I would say I think there are a lot of things that we could perceive or look at as challenges. But, for me, it's officer wellness. I think that, one of my concerns is how we as an organization come out of losing Ty.
Right.
And, what that meant to us, the first officer killed in the line of duty for the Elk Grove Police Department. But moreover, what our officers have gone through in the last 2 years, in particular with COVID, the constraints that have put on the communication piece when something has happened, all of the trauma that they experience in the field, that our membership now is seeing on a daily basis. And you couple that with the loss of Ty, and what does that do to our mindset? And what does that do to an employee who may be on the fringe of, do I want to stay in this profession? So for me, I think that recognizing the wellness piece for us to be a successful organization for our city and to be successful for the membership of this policing organization, it's making sure that they have every tool that they need to be healthy. And because that health or that mental wellness will absolutely drive how we respond to our community, how we respond to each other, and how we're able to continue providing a high level of policing. Because if we're not healthy internally, it's hard to do any of those things for our community.
Yeah. So former Chief Albright had announced earlier this month that violent crime and property crime had increased slightly over the past year, although not as much as in a few other cities. What are some ways that you plan to address the increase in violent crime?
So the violent crime, a significant portion of the violent crime is actually domestic violence. We've advocates and we have training, CIT training for our officers, which is critical incident training. Sorry, I didn't use acronyms too much. But it is, training to prepare officers that when we respond to one of those scenes, a domestic violence scene or a scene where there's a domestic disturbance in a family, that we can provide wraparound services to try to mitigate the exposure to those families or prevent it from happening again by providing the tools that they might need, whether through mental health clinicians or just officers' presence and or removing family members from that environment, providing them a safe place to go. So when it comes to domestic violence or the reporting of the violent crime, that aspect of it is something that we've become very proficient at when it comes to providing the extra service. And that's education for us, and it's education for our community, and it's providing that out for victims in those situations. That portion for our city was a significant bump in the violent crime here, which was far greater than some of the others that we've seen when it comes to guns and other violence in our city. It is a trend that is nationwide, and again, it is in our region as well. But for us in our city, the domestic violence component of that is something that we really wrap ourselves around and try to mitigate as much as we can. We want to have a safe place for all of our families in our community, and we want to be able to provide a safe out for them when they're experiencing those moments in that critical time in their lives. So for us, it's being present, it's being available to them, and it's being assured that we have those tools for the officers and for our community. The property crimes and some of the other areas that, while our numbers aren't high, they have gone up. I think it was 3.7% for property crime. Mm-hmm. That's where I kind of spoke about it earlier. We utilize technology with intelligence-led policing, our real-time information center, and our investigators. And we do a lot of data analysis, and through that data analysis, we're able to identify areas where we believe those things will happen. We try to predict where we think some of the crimes might take place. So we're able to utilize our real-time information center and ILP to establish or develop game plans, or we can put resources into the field and use it. And it's, we say the adage, work smarter, not harder. We're able to leverage technology to make our jobs easier without burning resources or spending monies that don't need to be spent, by predicting where some of these things may occur. We have wonderful successes. In fact, we had one where there were some tools that were stolen, and through basically analysis and data, our real-time information center being able to pick up these cars and some of the things that were stolen off of some of our tracking systems within the city, we were able to find it, and that was all based on the data and some intelligence-led policing. We were able to return the tools that were stolen, and it took 1 day, I believe. Correct? It was within that 1 or 2 day time period, all based on data and all based on what we believe was going to happen and where these cars or the suspects might be. So again, it's using the tools. It's not sticking 40 cops out on the streets, sitting on one thing, waiting for something to happen. It's actually planning and preparing for it to occur based on the data that we get, having the right equipment, technology, and people in place at the right time. And, it's really working smarter and ensuring that our city, because we do have the support for the technology and the communication piece, that we're there in a time when things may or may not happen. And so I would say for us, preventing some of those things that with the violent crime and or property crimes, it's going to be based on technology and using that piece in policing to police smarter for our community.
Got it. This was a question from Facebook. So the city recently received a study that recommends adding 27 more officers over the next 5 years, and also a community prosecutor. What do we need to do to make this happen?
So I think a couple of really excellent opportunities for us. The idea of 27 staff members over the next 5 years is something that we all would love to see and would want to see. Based on those recommendations, I think what's important to note is that that's not just sworn, it's professional staff. It's our CSOs who are an integral part of what we do. Our CSOs take reports, and they do vacation checks and other things that that free up officers to be free to handle crime when it occurs in our city. It's for dispatchers. It's to create dispatch positions, call taker positions. It's for additional administrative staff here to really help us get things done. It's for additional professional staff supervisors so that we have less of a span of control of supervision. So that study is a wonderful study because it kind of lays out a roadmap of where we should and would like to be in a 5-year period. The prosecutor itself is something that, if we have that opportunity in our city, would be invaluable, because it would truly address quality of life crimes. And when there's an arrest made, and we have a certain amount of arrests that take place, whether it's a burglary or a vandalism or something that kind of affects the way we look in our city, and those go to the district attorney's office now. Sometimes they don't have the same attention level that they would if it was specifically to our city. And if our prosecutor is the one that takes that package, takes it down to the court, to the district attorney's office, it gets filed, they follow through with the case, so they're intimately involved with the process and the investigation in and of itself, and they're able to address it because they're here and they're part of our community as far as the law enforcement and quality of life aspect of what we do. So if we have an opportunity to get a community prosecutor, I'm in full support of that. I know that our city and our city manager and our elected officials would like to have that as a process or a part of who we are in our city. I think we have that opportunity. But again, it's working with our city and our community partners to see if it's viable and see if it's something that we need here or we should have here. I don't think that, I think that we have support for the idea of that and what that might look like. And I think that it's no secret that we would love it if we could make that happen. We really would. But again, it has to make sense. It has to make sense for us, for our city as a whole, for us to be able to do that and ensure that it's a position
fiscally too.
Fund. And that's where I was just going. Yeah, make sure that we can fund it.
Yeah.
Because that's the piece for us is we want to be responsible for the taxpayer dollar, and just to do it because you can is not what we do. And that's why we've been so successful, is because we really evaluate everything that we do, and it has to make sense for us.
So the Sky River Casino is expected to open up later this year, and one of the biggest complaints that I have seen on Facebook is that the crime will increase. Are you concerned this could happen, and how will the police department work with the casino to ensure that it doesn't happen?
So we have worked with our casino partners from the very beginning, or whether through the initial talks and the initial stages, and what law enforcement would look like for our city. And I would say that we haven't seen any study that would indicate crime is going to have an uptick around casinos. In our neighboring cities, that hasn't been the case. But for us, our city leaders have, and our organization, our police department, and working together, it's been a very thoughtful process. We've put everything in place with our casino partners to ensure that the highest quality of life is maintained, regardless of what we have built in our city. We work with them just like we've worked with all of the other significant entities that have come here that are a large-based organization, to ensure that policing or public safety is paramount in their approach to whatever they're deciding to build. Our city has and will always continue to look at public safety for generations, and in the immediate, we're putting all the things in place, working with the casino and our partners to ensure that doesn't change. I think that if you've seen how our city has been developed, it's very thoughtful. There aren't things that are done that are going to jeopardize our community safety. It's not going to jeopardize our partner safety. They aren't going to come to an environment or be part of an environment that isn't safe. Whether it's a casino or it's any other businesses coming to our city, public safety is first for them. And I feel that working with our casino partners and recognizing that we have an opportunity to partner with them, the safety is going to be as strong as that relationship is that they have already established in our community. And our response to our community when it comes to public safety is not going to change. It's going to be the same, and I do not anticipate any problems with our casino.
That's good to know. Okay, last question. How can we get more patrols around schools at pickup and drop off? Because that seems to be a big question that people have, about that kind of stuff.
So we have our current SRO program for our school resource officers is actually a very strong program. In addition to that, we partner with the Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services in our city and our school district. Well, our school district partners with them, but we obviously work in our city. And so we work in conjunction with them, ensuring that our schools are safe. And on top of that, I'd say at the time that our kids are leaving their schools or getting out of schools, we have a pretty robust patrol system in place at that time, shift change and other things that are occurring right at that time. So we have a significant number of officers on the street. But I think being vigilant and being visible for our schools, and we have a lot of schools, but we also have excellent relationships with our schools. And when things happen or there are concerns, before those things become escalated, we communicate with our schools, whether it's whether there's a positive thing happening or there's something that is concerning. We ensure that they're safe, that our kids are safe, and that we have a high visibility in the area where those schools are if something is happening. But moreover, we are just integrated in our community. We go to our schools. We do crosswalk events, whether it's in the morning or in the evening. We attend and participate in things for our community and our schools that ensures a high visibility. And I think just having our presence in many of these schools ensures or makes our community feel that not only are we safe, but we actually are safe because we're there. And in times of crisis, we're there for them, but also in times of when things are good, we're also there. I think we're very fortunate to have a relationship with our community and our schools that we can always be present when needed. And I don't think that there is ever a time that I can recall that we haven't been able to be there for our schools or the students in our schools. And that's not going to change. In fact, I would say that if we get an opportunity to add or have a greater presence in our schools, we will. And that's something that I think that we would all like to see. But it has to make sense for our schools. We have to make sure that our schools want us in that capacity in them. But it's something that if wanted, we will absolutely try to be part of.